The Drake Hotel's ornate conference room felt suddenly airless as Emma Wilson stared at the document placed before her. 38 pages of legal jargon, bound in a leather portfolio embossed with the Reynolds family crest. 2 days. Just 2 days before her wedding, and here she sat, ambushed. "It's standard procedure, dear," Rebecca Reynolds said, her voice honeyed but her eyes cold as Chicago winter. She sat across from Emma, impeccably dressed in a Chanel suit, her silver-streaked hair arranged in a flawless bob. Every Reynolds bride has signed one. Samuel Reynolds, tall and imposing in his bespoke suit, stood by the window overlooking Michigan Avenue, his back partially turned as if this unpleasantness was beneath his direct attention. Brandon understands the necessity. Family tradition, you might say. Emma's fingers trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages. The prenuptial agreement was nothing short of predatory, designed to ensure that in case of divorce, she would walk away with virtually nothing from her marriage to Brandon Reynolds. Even her educational software company, Code Learn, which she had built from scratch, could potentially fall under Reynolds' family control. "I'm sure you'll find everything in order," said Jeffrey Collins, the Reynolds family attorney, sliding a Mont Blanc pen toward her. "We can witness your signature now and put this matter behind us." Emma felt heat rising to her cheeks. For 2 years, she had endured the subtle condescension from Brandon's family, the barely concealed assumptions that she, a simple software developer from a modest background, was marrying into the prestigious Reynolds law dynasty for money. The sidelong glances when she mentioned her small apartment in Wicker Park, the surprised comments when she recognized fine wine or art, the patronizing smiles when she discussed business. "I'll need time to review this," Emma said, closing the portfolio with deliberate slowness. "And my own attorney should look it over." Rebecca's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched. "Your own attorney? Surely that's unnecessary. Jeffrey is one of Chicago's finest lawyers." "He's your lawyer, not mine," Emma replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "And 2 days before our wedding is hardly appropriate timing for such an important document." Samuel turned from the window, irritation flashing across his patrician features. "Brandon mentioned you were independent-minded, but this is a formality. All Reynolds marriages begin this way." Emma stood, gathering her coat and bag. "Then I suppose the Reynolds family won't mind waiting 24 hours for my response." She met Samuel's gaze directly. "After all, what's the rush if it's just a formality?" As she walked out of the Drake Hotel into the brisk autumn air, Emma pulled out her phone and dialed a number she'd never expected to use. Harold Winters, one of Chicago's most respected attorneys, and more importantly, someone with no connections to the Reynolds family. "Mr. Winters? Emma Wilson. I need your help, urgently. Can I see you today? It's about a prenuptial agreement, and a counteroffer they won't be expecting." The offices of Winters and Associates occupied the 32nd floor of a sleek downtown building with views of Lake Michigan. Harold Winters, a distinguished man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses, listened intently as Emma explained her situation. "So they've essentially ambushed you with this agreement 2 days before your wedding," he summarized, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Classic power play. They're counting on emotional pressure and time constraints to force compliance." Emma nodded, her auburn hair falling across her shoulders. "They've always treated me like I'm marrying Brandon for his family's money, like I couldn't possibly bring anything of value to the table besides my youth and looks." Harold leaned back in his chair. "And what exactly do you bring to the table, Ms. Wilson? I need to understand your position to craft an appropriate response." Emma took a deep breath. This was the moment she'd been avoiding for so long, the secret she'd kept even from Brandon, not out of deception, but from a lifetime of protective instinct. "My grandmother was Rose Wilson," she said quietly. Harold's eyebrows rose fractionally, the only indication that the name meant something to him. "Rose Wilson, who lived in a modest bungalow in Evanston, who wore the same winter coat for 20 years and clipped coupons from the Sunday paper." Emma smiled. "The same Rose Wilson who quietly built a $7 million investment portfolio while working as a high school mathematics teacher. The Rose Wilson who passed away 3 years ago and left everything to her only grandchild." Harold's professional composure gave way to genuine surprise. $7 million? $7,312,000 to be exact, Emma confirmed. Plus the house in Evanston. I've kept it quiet because that's how Grandma Rose lived. Understanding the value of privacy and understatement. She taught me that wealth shouldn't define you, but it can protect you. And Brandon doesn't know? Emma shook her head. I've been waiting for the right time. I wanted him to love me for who I am, not what I have. And I wanted to be sure his family saw me, really saw me, before they knew. Harold nodded thoughtfully. And your company, CodeLearn? The educational software you mentioned? Currently valued at just over $5 million. We're in talks with 3 major school districts for implementation next fall. Emma's voice carried quiet pride. I built it with seed money from Grandma Rose's inheritance, but its growth has been all my work for the past 3 years. The attorney whistled softly. So the woman the Reynolds family has been subtly dismissing as a gold digger is worth significantly more than they realize. Ironic, isn't it? Emma said with a hint of sadness. I never wanted this to become about money, but they've made it so. Harold opened his laptop. Ms. Wilson, I believe we have an opportunity here to reset the power dynamic completely. If you're willing to reveal your financial position, we can craft a counteroffer that will leave the Reynolds family quite speechless. Emma hesitated only briefly before a determined smile spread across her face. Mr. Winters, I've spent 2 years being underestimated by the Reynolds family. I think it's time they learned who they're really dealing with. As they began drafting the counter-proposal, Emma felt a strange sense of liberation. Her grandmother's voice seemed to whisper in her ear, Never use your strength to dominate, dear. Use it to establish respect. Brandon Reynolds paced the length of Emma's loft apartment, his normally composed demeanor visibly shaken. I had no idea they were planning this, Emma. I swear to you. Emma watched him from her position by the window. At 6'2", with dark hair and the confident bearing that came from generations of privilege, Brandon had always been the picture of self-assurance. Seeing him rattled was unsettling. You didn't know they were planning to ambush me with a prenup that would essentially leave me destitute if we ever divorced. Her voice was calm but edged with hurt. Brandon ran a hand through his hair. I knew there would be a prenup. That's standard in my family. But I never saw the terms. Dad said the lawyers would handle it. He stopped pacing and faced her directly. I should have been more involved. I'm sorry. Emma studied him, searching for any hint of deception. Their relationship had always been a curious balance. The scion of Chicago legal royalty and the dedicated software developer who preferred coding to cocktail parties. She'd fallen in love with his kindness, his lack of pretension despite his background, and his genuine interest in her work. But moments like this reminded her of the world he came from. I'm meeting with your parents again tomorrow, she said. Harold Winters will be accompanying me. Brandon's eyebrows shot up. Harold Winters? The Harold Winters who decimated Mitchum Industries in that class action last year? The very same. Emma, Brandon approached her cautiously. What exactly are you planning? She turned to face the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. I'm planning to advocate for myself, Brandon. Something I should have done from the beginning with your family. After a moment of silence, she felt his arms encircle her from behind. I love you, he said quietly. Not the Reynolds name, not the family connections, just you. Whatever you're planning tomorrow, I want you to know that. Emma leaned back against him, drawing strength from his warmth. Then I need you to do something for me. Anything. Be there tomorrow. Witness everything. And no matter what happens, remember that I've always been honest about who I am, even if I haven't shared every detail of my life. Brandon turned her to face him, confusion evident in his expression. You're scaring me a little. Emma offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Good. The Reynolds family has been comfortable for too long. A little healthy fear might be exactly what we need. The next morning, the same conference room at the Drake Hotel felt charged with tension. Rebecca and Samuel Reynolds sat side by side, their attorney Jeffrey Collins beside them. Brandon had positioned himself halfway between his parents and Emma, physically representing his emotional state. Harold Winters placed a leather portfolio on the table, this one without a family crest. Ms. Wilson has reviewed your proposed agreement and has prepared a response. Rebecca smiled thinly. We're pleased to hear it. I trust she's found everything satisfactory. On the contrary, Harold replied pleasantly, Ms. Wilson finds your proposal completely unacceptable and frankly insulting. Samuel Reynolds straightened, his expression darkening. Insulting? We're protecting generations of family assets. It's perfectly standard. Emma, dressed in a sleek charcoal suit that conveyed both professionalism and confidence, finally spoke. What's standard, Mr. Reynolds, is a prenuptial agreement that protects both parties' interests. What you've proposed is a document designed to leave me vulnerable while shielding your family completely. Jeffrey Collins cleared his throat. Perhaps Ms. Wilson doesn't fully understand the legal implications. I understand perfectly, Emma interrupted, as does my attorney, which is why we've prepared an alternative. Harold slid the portfolio across the table. A counter-proposal that Ms. Wilson finds more equitable. As Samuel opened the document and began reading, Emma watched his expression transform from dismissive to confused to utterly astonished. Rebecca, peering over his shoulder, gasped audibly. This can't be correct, Samuel finally managed, looking up at Emma with new eyes. Every figure is accurate and verifiable, Harold confirmed. Ms. Wilson's net worth, including liquid assets, real estate, and her company valuation, totals approximately $12 million. The counterproposal simply ensures that her assets receive the same protections as the Reynolds family holdings. $12 million? Rebecca echoed, her composure slipping for perhaps the first time in her public life. Brandon stared at Emma, shock evident in his features. Emma? Is this true? Emma met his gaze steadily. My grandmother Rose left me $7 million when she passed away. I used part of it to fund CodeLearn, which has grown significantly. I kept it private because that's how I was raised, to be discreet about financial matters. She turned to face Rebecca and Samuel directly. I never mentioned it because I wanted to be accepted for who I am, not what I have. Ironically, you've spent 2 years treating me as if I were after your family's money, when all along I never needed it. The silence that followed was profound. Brandon stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the polished floor. May I speak with Emma alone, please? Before anyone could object, he had taken Emma's hand and led her from the conference room into a small adjoining parlor, closing the door firmly behind them. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then, to her complete surprise, a slow smile spread across his face. You, he said with something like wonder, are absolutely magnificent. Emma blinked. You're not angry that I kept this from you? Brandon shook his head. How could I be? You just delivered the most elegant lesson my parents have ever received. He took her hands in his. But I need to know. Why didn't you tell me? Emma's gaze dropped to their joined hands. At first, I was just being cautious. My grandmother taught me that money changes how people see you. Then, as I fell in love with you, I wanted to be certain you were falling for me, just Emma, not Emma with a $7 million inheritance. And later? Brandon prompted gently. Later, she sighed. Later it became about your family. They were so convinced I was beneath you, so satisfied with their assessment of me as some fortune-hunting nobody. Part of me wanted to prove I could win them over without revealing my financial status. Brandon's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. And now? Emma looked up, meeting his eyes directly. Now I realize that was prideful and perhaps a bit foolish. Real relationships, including family relationships, have to be built on honesty and mutual respect. I couldn't demand the latter without offering the former. Brandon was quiet for a moment, then laughed softly. You know what I love most about this situation? The look on my mother's face when she realized she spent 2 years condescending to a woman worth $12 million. Despite herself, Emma smiled. That wasn't my primary goal. No, but it's a delightful side effect. His expression grew serious. What happens now? With the prenup, I mean. That depends on your parents, Emma replied. My counteroffer is fair and protects both our interests. If they can accept that I'm an equal partner in this marriage, financially and otherwise, then we move forward. Brandon nodded decisively. Then let's go make that crystal clear. When they returned to the conference room, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Samuel Reynolds was engaged in intense whispered conversation with Jeffrey Collins, while Rebecca sat perfectly still, her social mask firmly back in place. Brandon didn't wait for anyone else to speak. Emma's counter-proposal is entirely reasonable. I fully support it and expect my family to do the same. Samuel looked up sharply. Brandon, we need time to review these unexpected developments. What's to review? Brandon asked. Emma has been transparent about her financial position. Her attorney has drafted a fair agreement that protects both parties. Unless you're suggesting that the Reynolds family only approves of prenuptial agreements when they're completely one-sided. Rebecca flinched slightly at her son's tone. Brandon, darling, we're simply surprised. You must admit this is unexpected. No more unexpected than ambushing my fiancé 2 days before our wedding, Brandon replied evenly. Harold Winters, who had been observing the family dynamics with professional detachment, spoke up. If I may suggest, the simplest path forward would be to accept Ms. Wilson's counterproposal. It's equitable, thorough, and protects both families' interests. Alternatively, we could proceed with no prenuptial agreement whatsoever. The latter suggestion had exactly the effect Emma had anticipated. Samuel Reynolds straightened in his chair. That won't be necessary, he said quickly. We can certainly work with Ms. Wilson's proposal. Emma exchanged a glance with Harold, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Wonderful, she said. I believe we can have the final documents ready for signature by this evening. As Jeffrey Collins began discussing technical details with Harold, Emma noticed Rebecca Reynolds watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Not quite respect, not quite acceptance, but something that had definitely replaced the condescension of their previous interactions. It was a start. The night before her wedding, Emma stood on the balcony of the presidential suite at the Drake Hotel, watching the lights of Chicago shimmer on Lake Michigan. The past 24 hours had been a whirlwind of final preparations, rehearsal dinner festivities, and, most significantly, a complete reorganization of her relationship with the Reynolds family. The door to the suite opened, and Emma turned to see Rebecca Reynolds enter, carrying a large flat box tied with white ribbon. "May I join you?" Rebecca asked, her tone lacking its usual authoritative edge. Emma nodded, curious. The two women stood side by side, looking out at the city lights. "Chicago looks magical from up here," Rebecca commented after a moment. "It does," Emma agreed. "My grandmother used to say that nighttime transforms cities. All you see are the lights, not the flaws." Rebecca turned slightly toward her. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman, the wisest I've known." Another silence fell, this one less uncomfortable than those that had come before. "I brought you something," Rebecca finally said, offering the box. "A tradition in the Reynolds family." Emma accepted it cautiously. "Thank you." "Open it," Rebecca urged, a hint of uncharacteristic nervousness in her voice. Inside the box, nestled in tissue paper, lay a stunning antique lace veil, delicate and clearly precious. "This has been worn by Reynolds brides for 4 generations," Rebecca explained. "My mother-in-law presented it to me the night before my wedding to Samuel. I would be honored if you would consider wearing it tomorrow." Emma carefully lifted the veil, feeling the weight of history in its delicate threads. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. "Emma?" Rebecca seemed to struggle with her words, something Emma had never witnessed before. "I owe you an apology. Samuel and we made assumptions about you that were unfair and, as it turns out, completely incorrect." "Because of my financial situation?" Emma asked pointedly. Rebecca had the grace to look chagrined. "Initially, yes. But that's not why I'm apologizing now." She took a deep breath. "Watching you handle the prenuptial situation with such dignity and confidence, it made me realize we've underestimated you in ways that go far beyond money." She gestured toward the city. "You built a successful company that's improving education for thousands of children. You've managed significant wealth with discretion and wisdom. And most importantly, you've made our son happier than we've ever seen him." Her voice softened. "Those accomplishments deserve respect, regardless of your bank balance." Emma studied the older woman's face, searching for signs of insincerity, but finding none. "Thank you for saying that," she said finally. "It means a lot to me." Rebecca nodded, then added with a hint of her usual directness, "Of course, I won't pretend the financial revelation didn't change things. Samuel is particularly impressed by your investment portfolio diversification." Despite herself, Emma laughed. "I'll take it. Respect has to start somewhere." Rebecca smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her usually stern features. "Indeed it does." She gestured to the veil. "Will you wear it?" Emma ran her fingers along the delicate lace. "I would be honored," she said, and meant it. Later that evening, as Emma prepared for bed, her phone chimed with a text from Brandon. "My father just asked if you might consider joining the board of the Reynolds Foundation. Apparently, your business acumen would be an asset." A second message followed. In case it wasn't clear, this is his version of an olive branch. Emma smiled as she typed her response. "Tell him I'd be delighted to discuss it. After the honeymoon." She placed her phone on the nightstand and caught her reflection in the mirror. Tomorrow she would become Emma Wilson Reynolds, not as the fortune hunter the family had initially perceived, but as an equal partner bringing her own strength, wisdom, and yes, fortune to the union. Rose would have been proud. The grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel had been transformed into a vision of elegant simplicity for the wedding reception. Cream-colored roses and hydrangeas adorned the tables. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the gathered guests, and floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the Chicago skyline as evening descended. Emma, still wearing Rebecca's family veil with her sleek modern gown, moved through the crowd with Brandon at her side. The weight of secrets lifted. She found herself enjoying the celebration with an unexpected lightness. Samuel Reynolds approached, champagne flute in hand. "A word with my new daughter-in-law?" he requested, with none of the commanding tone that had once characterized his interactions with Emma. Brandon squeezed her hand before moving away to greet other guests, leaving Emma alone with her new father-in-law. "The ceremony was beautiful," Samuel offered. "Brandon tells me you designed much of it yourself." Emma nodded. "I wanted something that honored traditions while still feeling contemporary. A thoughtful balance," Samuel acknowledged. He seemed to hesitate, then continued, "Rather like your approach to our family situation." Emma raised an eyebrow, waiting. "I've been in corporate law for 35 years, Samuel said, his gaze direct. "In that time, I've developed what I believed was an infallible ability to assess people quickly and accurately." He sipped his champagne. "You have thoroughly disproven that belief." Despite the formal language, Emma could sense the admission cost him something. "People are complex, Mr. Reynolds. We all contain multitudes." "Samuel, please," he corrected. "And yes, apparently they do." He studied her for a moment. "Brandon tells me your company is developing advanced mathematics programs for underserved schools." "That's right," Emma confirmed. "We're focusing on districts with limited resources. The software adapts to individual learning styles." "Remarkable," Samuel said, and seemed to mean it. "The Reynolds Foundation has an education initiative that might complement your work. Perhaps next month, once you're settled, we could discuss potential collaboration." The offer was clearly meaningful. Not just an olive branch, but a recognition of her professional worth. "I'd like that," Emma replied. Samuel nodded, looking satisfied. "Good. Very good." He glanced across the room to where Rebecca was chatting with Emma's college roommate. "You've quite transformed our family dynamic, you know." "That wasn't my intention," Emma said honestly. "Perhaps not, but it may have been necessary." Samuel's expression softened slightly. "Brandon has always been his own man, but seeing him stand up to us so definitively on your behalf, I admit to feeling a certain paternal pride." Before Emma could respond, Harold Winters appeared beside them, elegant in his tuxedo. "Sorry to interrupt, but I believe the first dance is being announced." "Of course," Samuel said, stepping back. But he paused to add quietly, "Welcome to the family, Emma. Truly." As Emma moved toward the center of the ballroom where Brandon waited, Harold murmured, "Quite a transformation in the Reynolds patriarch." Emma smiled. Amazing what a little mutual respect can accomplish. The orchestra began playing their chosen song, a modern arrangement of a classic melody, as Brandon took her in his arms. As they moved across the dance floor, Emma caught glimpses of their assembled guests. Rebecca Reynolds deep in conversation with Emma's mentor from tech school. Samuel showing Emma's cousin the view from the ballroom windows. Harold Winters raising a toast with Jeffrey Collins. Former adversaries now finding common ground. "Happy?" Brandon asked softly, his eyes never leaving hers as they danced. "Very," Emma confirmed, "though I can't help thinking about Grandma Rose. She would have enjoyed seeing all of this unfold." Brandon smiled. The brilliant mathematician who built an investment empire while living in a modest bungalow? I wish I could have met her. She would have liked you, Emma said, realizing as she spoke that it was true. She always said the measure of a person isn't how they treat those they perceive as equals, but how they respond when the power dynamic shifts. "And how did I measure up?" Brandon asked, a hint of vulnerability in his question. Emma tightened her arms around him. "Perfectly. You chose us, our partnership, over everything else." As they continued to dance, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought them here. What had begun as a confrontation had transformed into something unexpected. Not just a marriage, but a realignment of an entire family system based on newfound mutual respect. Her grandmother had left her far more than money. She had bestowed the wisdom to use it properly, the strength to stand up for herself, and the understanding that true partnerships, in business, in family, in love, required honesty and equality. As Brandon spun her beneath the chandeliers, Emma caught Samuel raising his glass to her in a private toast. She nodded in acknowledgement, accepting the gesture for what it was. Not surrender, but recognition. The beginning of a new chapter for all of them. And that, she thought as Brandon drew her close again, was worth far more than $7 million. If you enjoyed this story of transformation and empowerment, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps bring more stories like Emma's to life.